Do you want to reduce your energy bills? Or maybe you want to use greener energy? Go solar and get a discount. Right now, Which members can get a 7.5% discount on solar panels and their installation if you use Heatable, a Which Trusted Trader approved service. You can also include a storage battery and EV charger, handy if you're looking at making the switch to an electric car. To make use of this exclusive offer, simply head to which.co.uk/solar-offer. That's which.co.uk/solar-offer before the 30th of September 2025. And if you're not already a Which member, you can grab a year's membership for 50% off the usual price. To do that, go to which.co.uk/podcast offer to get involved. Start your solar journey today. Go solar and get a discount with Which.
There's a new way to pay. Retailers love it, and so do the government and financial regulators. But can you trust it? Welcome to Which Money. Hello, I'm Lucia Ariano, and joining us this week we have Which senior researcher and writer Chiara Cavalieri. Hello, Chiara.
Hello.
And also senior policy advisor here at Which, Tony Herbert. Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. Shall we start from the top then? This is a new payment for buying things online. It's called Pay by Bank. It was honestly completely new to me before I started researching for this episode. So, Chiara, what can you tell us?
Basically, it's just a way to make a payment directly from your bank account instead of using a card.
Mm-hmm. And how does it differ then from what we might be used to? So, bank transfers or paying by a card?
It's a bank transfer, so it's a way to pay the company directly. You click Pay by Bank at the checkout and it directs you to your bank's website or app and you can make the payment from there.
Now, as someone that wasn't familiar with this term Pay by Bank before the show today, sat with you and Tony just before off air, you literally showed me how it worked. And I think that really helped me figure out what it was we're talking about. Tony, could you just talk us through the example you gave me? So you're on your Amex app and you want to pay off your bill. How do you do it?
Yeah, sure. It's really quite simple. So what you would do if you wanted to pay off your credit card bill via Pay by Bank, you go into your credit card app, open it up, choose that you want to make a payment, specify the amount, choose the bank from a list, so your bank. So I chose Nationwide, for example. It then whisks me across to the Nationwide app, which I then authenticate with my biometric fingerprint. Mm-hmm. Immediately, it is pre-populated saying, do you want to make a payment of X to pay off this credit card? If you do, again, you authenticate it. That's it. All done. Takes you back to your credit card app, confirms payment. Nice and smooth. Should take 20, 30 seconds.
I mean, this sounds all very high tech. And actually, using that example, I think I've probably used Pay by Bank before, or what's known as open banking, which this is a type of. So we're going to get onto the pros and cons. I mean, let's start with some pros, perhaps not for us, but why, say, do retailers like it?
Well, I mean, the big answer is cost. It's cheaper. So when you make a card payment, be it debit card or credit card, there's a whole range of kind of middlemen in the middle passing on your money across to the retailer. Mm. What open banking payments do is kind of get rid of those middlemen so the payment goes much more kind of directly. So it costs merchants a lot less to accept payment by Pay by Bank. So that's the first thing, cost. It's also quicker, I think. It's an immediate transfer, so retailers get their hands on the money much more quickly. That's quite a good thing. And then thirdly, I'd say there's some evidence to suggest that paying in this way increases retailer, what they call conversion. So people don't drop off. So if you're paying for something with a card, sometimes you're putting in your card details or you haven't got it with you or you mistype it, that kind of thing. With this, because it's pretty seamless, you can do it all through a few taps on your phone. People don't drop off. They make that transaction. So it's really quite a compelling case, I think, for retailers.
And I mentioned right at the top of the show too that government and financial regulators are into this as well. So what's their reasons for being so keen on it?
Well, I think it's fair to say that both government and regulators have kind of struggled for some time with kind of grappling with the power of the two big card companies, Visa and MasterCard. And so I think what the regulators and government see in open banking payments, in pay by bank, is potentially a viable competitor to cards. So they're looking for it to kind of introduce this competitive spirit to drive innovation and perhaps to drive costs down as well, which would ultimately, we hope, benefit consumers as well.
But we're a bit more cautious, as you'd expect from us at Which. And one of the reasons is about safety and security. So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so although we are fans of pay by bank, there are some shortcomings, and they specifically come if there were to be some problems or difficulties experienced with a purchase. Now, there's two main areas where this could be an issue. The first is where you buy something and what you get isn't as described or it doesn't come. The second is where the company you buy from goes bust. Now, in both of those cases, if you struggled to get your money back, but you'd paid with a debit card or a credit card, these would come in and have an obligation to help you get a refund for the amount you've paid. With pay by bank, these protections simply don't exist at the moment.
So is there anything in their place?
I suppose consumers can always rely on the kind of the statutory protections, so things like the Consumer Rights Act. So we would always say in the first instance, if you've got a problem with a purchase, go to the retailer, see if you can sort it out. But problems start to arise where if they're not playing ball, if they don't want to refund you, you might have to go to the small claims court, which can be quite onerous for an individual consumer. It might not be worth your while. So that's about it really at the moment. So it's a bit of a kind of a glaring gap, I would suggest, for these purchase protections, and particularly, I think, where the company might go bust. So that's a bigger risk, I think, if you're paying for something, but you're not going to consume it immediately. So if you're buying, I don't know, like flight tickets, paying for a holiday, festival tickets, something you're going to consume some way down the line, there's a risk that they might not deliver. If that company might go bust, you'll be left on your own at the moment if you paid by bank. Whereas if you'd paid specifically by credit card and also by debit card, you would have some protection. They would be obliged to come in and try and get your money back.
And I suppose here, just to spell it out, we're talking about chargeback, which is your debit card protection. You're nodding at me, Chiara, and Section 75, which we love at Which, don't we? So it would be a shame not to have those protections.
Yeah, absolutely. So Section 75 is really strong, powerful protection. Chargeback, less so, but really important and a really useful tool for a lot of consumers when they use a debit or credit card. And because you're not making a card payment, you're making a bank transfer, so you lose those card protections. And it's really important for consumers to understand that before they use it.
And what about then if we bring in fraud and scams? How do your protections fare where scams and fraud is concerned?
So I think the picture is brighter for fraud protections because you still have protection against unauthorised fraud. That's under the payment services regulations. So they'll apply whether you've used a card or a bank transfer. There's also the new authorised push payment fraud scheme, which protects you against authorised bank transfers where you've been tricked into sending money to a scammer. So I think we're less concerned about the fraud protections and much more concerned about the purchase protections, those card protections that you lose.
And we mentioned before the show started, and I think it's quite interesting how this might work in person, because you were saying that actually there are examples where you can use pay by bank in person. I think Holland and Barrett, you might have mentioned earlier.
Yeah, we've heard of a few, not so many, but we've heard of a few instances where people have been using pay by bank in the wild. So we had one member get in touch with us because she had paid for a secondhand car using one of the pay-by-bank providers. And actually she did so without realising that's what she'd done. So I think it's not always as obvious as you might think that you're using it. But essentially, if you're redirected to your bank's app or website, you're making a bank transfer, you're not making a card payment. And so that's when you need to think about whether you need those protections, those card protections. And also, really importantly, if you are being asked to scan a QR code, which flips you to your bank's app or website, you need to be really sure about where that's coming from. We know that there's lots of scams being hidden in these QR codes. So just be really extra cautious, especially while this payment's in its infancy and people aren't so aware of what it looks like or what it should look like. I think the main message is that you need to be absolutely sure that you're going to your app, your bank's app or your bank's website. So it should be the app that's on your phone, or it should be the website that you're familiar with. Make sure you know its URL, its web address. And if anything looks suspicious, just don't bother. Get out of there.
100%. And it's a great point about QR codes. That's why I wanted to mention it, because paying for anything with a QR code kind of rang alarm bells for me, given all of your work, actually, Chiara, on scams in that area. And I suppose we have talked about it already, but could we just have a quick overview then of what you think needs to change to protect customers in this area?
Yeah, certainly. So we want these transactions to come with basically an appropriate level of purchase protection. They've been talked about for quite some time since open banking was back in its infancy. There's been a number of official reports called for it, but we haven't really seen any progress. And actually the need is becoming much more critical as we're starting to see pay by bank expand into all sorts of retail environments. So we'd like to see the regulators get a firm grip of this and propose how they will introduce some purchase protections so that consumers can benefit from this new payment method, which, we like the fundamentals of, but we just want to see a bit of protection added.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.
Now, we've rightfully been very cautious so far, and I'm pleased that we've covered all of the protections and what needs to change. But, our listeners might be wondering, okay, so how might this benefit me? Chiara, what are the benefits of us using Pay by Bank?
So I think it's fair to say that the big benefit it has over card payments is that you're not handing over any details. So when you make a payment, you're either adding your pre-stored card details or you're adding them in manually, and it means that there's an opportunity there for them to be stolen or leaked or for you to put them in wrong. So I think when it works, it's great. So you flip directly to your bank's app, the payment details are preloaded, you authorize it usually with your fingerprint or whatever you're used to using to authenticate payments, and you're done. You've not had to give Ryanair or Wizz Air or whoever else your card details, which is a good thing. As we said, obviously, we do have some question marks over the lack of purchase protections, but the actual payment method itself is really secure.
And I suppose given how, it sounds so techie, it's all very kind of online, using mobile, using a computer. I suppose this is going to be excluding some people who aren't using, online banking or app banking.
It does. I think we all know that innovations these days are pretty focused on digital customers. Having said that, I think we mentioned it earlier, we have seen a few examples of people being asked to use this in real life. But like you said, it usually flips you to your online bank account or your mobile bank account. Lots of people use at least one of those. But yes, absolutely, there will be lots of people who can't use this. And if you're used to buying your goods online, I guess if you're not particularly digitally savvy, it's just another thing for you to contend with. Hopefully this is an additional choice. It's not going to replace other methods of paying. But, if it's cheaper for retailers, we could see that it becomes the default option for many, which could be a concern.
And thinking about open banking broadly and pay by bank, as we've mentioned, it's so techy. And even just going through the example that we went through earlier, to get my head around the idea that I would go from my, say, credit card app, and that would take me to my current account app, it feels very techy. And maybe there are concerns over your data and how your data is being shared. Is that legitimate? Is that something that people are concerned about?
It is, but the reassuring thing is that for any of these retailers to be offering it, they've got to have a partnership with a regulated provider. And those regulated providers, we call them third-party payment providers, they are heavily vetted, and they themselves then heavily vet the retailers they work with. That's as things stand now. It's obviously in its infancy, and that's why it's mostly really established retailers that are using it. So the likes of Ryanair and Holland & Barrett, a few others. So at the moment, there's ways to make sure you're doing it safely. You can check various registers. There's one at Open Banking Limited, that's openbanking.org.uk, where there's a directory, basically. You can see which firms are regulated to offer open banking payments and make sure that you're using someone legitimate. There's also the Financial Services Register, which will tell you the same thing. So we would tell people to check that before they use it for the first time.
And we've talked a lot about, as you just said, it being in its infancy. So what's to come then? Tony, do you want to start us off here? What do you expect for the future of open banking and pay by bank?
Wow, yeah. So I think lots of people, particularly in the payments industry, are quite excited what the future holds. So at the moment, open banking payments are limited to kind of one-off payments. So you make the transaction, that's done. There are developments which would allow you to make something snappily called a commercial variable recurring payment using open banking. I kid you not, CVRPs. Now, what this is, it's basically an open banking payment that repeats. So it's heralded as a competitor to direct debit potentially, or card on file payments. And what this would allow is it would let the consumer set an amount, a kind of a frequency and a length of payments, and then off it would go. So they're thinking this could be used for payments to your energy provider, for example. So that's one development that I think we will start to see quite soon. They will be piloting this with certain sectors, probably starting later this year. So we're looking at energy providers, we're looking at local and central government, and also some financial services providers. So that's one thing to look for in the future. And then we've also talked a little bit about whether we start to see this becoming more prevalent out in the retail environment. When you go to shop, will you be able to pay for it via checkout? I think we might start to see more of that.
Yeah, scanning a QR code certainly feels like more effort than just tapping your card.
I think that's right. It is a bit clunky. Some people have suggested that to get around this, potentially pay by bank could in future be inserted into your online payment app, so your Google Pay, your Apple Pay, and could be used that way. That's some way off and is quite contentious.
Well, they're going to have to come up with a different name to the direct debit competitor, the competition to the direct debit. But that does sound very interesting. And Chiara, is there anything that you'd like to add, or any final thoughts of things we've covered or maybe not covered today?
I think the broad message is that we're not trying to scare people off this. We're just trying to make sure that they understand what protections they have, or rather don't have, when they use it. And also just to reassure them that if they're using open banking for payments or to share their bank account, they should do so securely, as we said earlier, about checking those registers to make sure that it's an authorised provider, a regulated provider, but also to remember that the power is yours to revoke consent. So if you want to stop sharing your data, or you want to cancel a recurring payment with a provider, just go to your app. You can do it via your app or via your online bank account. And that's the key to this, that you should be able to control how and when you share your data, how and when you stop a recurring payment.
And one last question for any listeners maybe wondering, because I certainly know I am, could this be the number one payment method anytime in the near future?
Possibly. I think we've seen a lot of airlines really taking this on board, less so in the rest of retail, to be fair. I hope that it doesn't become the default, but I think we'll see more and more places offering it. When I was researching this project, I saw more, every few weeks being added. So I think it will increase. It's a hard one to call because I think it depends. There's like clear incentives for businesses, but I think less so for consumers if people are quite used to using their cards and prefer the security of knowing they've got Section 75 and chargebacks. But if that changes and Pay by Bank does have the same level of protection, then I can't see why it wouldn't become just as popular.
I would just say I'd agree with all of that. I'd just say it's got an awful long way to go. I think the latest figures are there was 31 million open banking transactions in March this year. Sounds like a lot, but in February this year, there were 2 billion debit card transactions. So it's a drop in the ocean at the moment. It's increasing rapidly, but it's got a long way to go to be a real competitor to the cards.
Well, it's been a really, really interesting episode. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or any other podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media at Which UK or drop us an email to podcast@which.co.uk. See you next time.
Leaking roof? Car won't start? Needs to renovate? Here's what to look for when getting a trader to help. A recognised endorsement, where expert assessors set the bar high. Genuine customer reviews, so you don't get duped by cowboy fakers. A clear code of conduct to give you an extra layer of security. A robust complaints policy, so you can resolve disputes fairly. And the Which Trusted Trader badge that says choose me with confidence. You can trust Which to help you find the right traders for the job. We run thorough checks on traders, put them through in-depth assessments, then we give them the actions to make improvements and only endorse them when they've actioned them and made the grade. So, to choose with confidence, head to which.co.uk/traders or search for Which Trusted Traders.